All righty. Well, we don't have any public here at the moment, so I guess the public comment is not needed, but we've got 3 items here today. Bob is going to give us a transit update, Derek on a park and rec update, and the KDOT, is that you and Dave, Amanda?
Yeah.
The 3rd item, Dave?
Me and John. He's
Okay.
going to come in late.
Okay. It's all yours, Bob.
Okay, the upcoming service changes, which will go into effect starting August the 1st, at least the city side of it. The university side, of course, will go into effect when classes go back in session at KU. The first change we had is probably the most major change we've had in the service. For those of you that don't know much about what we've done over the years, Route 3, we created a flexible route at one time, which was a point deviation kind of route where we'd go into the community and the neighborhood to try to create artificial density in corridors so we could create a fixed route as a result of it. It wasn't very successful in finding a high density kind of corridor, so we ended up going back to pretty much what we had initially with the route several years ago, 6 years ago, I guess. That route, Route 3, when we restarted it, we started the route going out 3rd Street, and it went out 2nd to and across Peterson, and then up Castle to Lakeview. So we had this big loop on this section of it that I've got highlighted here. What we found out, though, in the last year of operating it is, one, we're having a hard time staying on time at the hospital because we have a lot of people that need some extra care and stuff getting on and off the bus and getting to the hospital. So that really jeopardizes our ability to stay on time, at least to that key location. That is the key location on this route. So, and what we found out when we started looking into it was that the route on Peterson and Castle and Lakeview, at least on kind of that western end of the route, there was virtually no ridership there, consistent ridership. There was ridership that would pop up from time to time, and there was a few on Peterson that I think we could still take care of with this new route alignment. So what we ended up doing, instead of making that westward hoe kind of movement across Peterson to Castle, was to just run it straight up North Iowa to Lakeview. And that still gets us close to the employment at Lawrence Paper and all the locations out there. And then when we started doing this as a fixed route a while back, we started coming back in on Michigan, which that gives us another opportunity to do something I'll talk about a little bit later. But anyway, that's the major change to Route 3. Route 11 is really the result of what's going on KU. You'll see a number of things that's associated with the Central District and with Irving Hill and all the work they've been doing with the Central District on that north side of the Central District. So we've had to reroute a number of routes as a result of that, and the area that I have highlighted is one of those. We're going back to where we originally were operating a few years ago before they started all the craziness in the Central District. So that's not much of a change there. Route 27, it's the southern end of that we have been concerned about. This southern end, this figure 8 portion of the southern end, we were doing kind of a figure 8. We were going over the same ground a couple times, which was confusing to passengers. They didn't know if the bus was going north to campus or it was going to Haskell. And so what we've done here, and if you can see the intersection of 23rd and Louisiana, we're trying to show that this route is going one way out and that same pattern back. So you know that the bus is going to come by there. If the bus is going that way, it's going to KU. If it's going that way, it's going to Haskell. So it's a little bit more predictable for people, especially down and around the Alabama, Louisiana, 25th area. So that's not much of a change, but I think it'll reward us a lot. Now we're starting to get into some of the heavier stuff, which is the Kayuu routing. Their routing did change dramatically. Now this route is a new route, Route 34. But if you will notice, this route at one time was part of Route 36. Route 36 went from North Michigan. It's that portion I talked about with Route 3. Route 36 used to go up into that area, and it went down through campus and then went back out on 6th Street, clear out the Gateway out by Lawrence Avenue, out in that area on 6th Street. So it's a long, cumbersome kind of route. that went a couple different directions. The high load points, of course, is the boulevard. People sometimes get confused about which way the bus is going and what they're supposed to get on. I've always been a believer in you give them a different number, they can figure that out, but if it's the same number, sometimes they get confused about what side of the street to get on. So with this route, what we've done, the lower block there that you see, we truncated Route 36 at the roundabout there by the fountain. So it's just going to turn around there and go right back instead of going on through and to Emory and all that stuff that it used to do on the 36. And then on the northern portion of that, since the Route 3 is doing that piece of North Michigan, we've pulled away from North Michigan, at least this route has. They're not losing service, they can still get there in virtually the same time by riding the 3 into downtown and get on the 11 or 10 to get to campus. So it's just, it just means a transference process. Route 36, this is the other piece, and it still has the moniker 36. But as you can see, it's this portion up here that is now Route 34. So, and everything else on this portion of the route stays exactly the same. So if you're doing through, and that's the way you typically look at routes, if you're going to have a lot of through traffic, maybe you want to keep that number the same. But that's not where the destination and the origin of most of the trips in this is, at least one end of it's going to be across the boulevard. So it could terminate there, which makes it kind of an easy change. Route 38 with the Central District, there's several routes that are changing how they go through that area. This route used to go across, would come across Stewart to 19th and go east on 19th to Naismith, and then go Naismith to Sunnyside Sunflower and kind of do that, what we used to call the southern loop. But it's not going to do that anymore. It's not going to go up Naismith. It's going to go through the Central District, which is the new, I forget what they're calling the southern portion of that, but the top portion is still Irving Hill. So that's what this kind of loop is here. That's all part of the Central District, the new Burge Union, and all of that involved. So, and then Route 41 is kind of doing the same thing. It's doing that loop that you see in here is part of that Central District loop. So it's going through the Central District also and Irving Hill, and part of this is bringing it back in line to where it was a few years ago before the Central District started its construction. Route 42 is one that's changing quite a bit. This whole section down here is changing. The route used to do this awkward, difficult to understand routing where it was going across Jayhawk Boulevard. It was always going westbound on Jayhawk Boulevard. So if you were standing there in front of Strong or Snow and getting on the bus, you could get on that bus. Well, if you didn't pay close attention, you might be going to Memorial Stadium and not down to Rec Center. Because it was doing this awkward thing, and it was always going the same direction on Jayhawk Boulevard, so it got very confusing. So we've tried to eliminate some of that. So the route now, the southern portion you see down there goes to the Central District, but instead of it going up and doing this one-way kind of thing and end up in two different places, now it comes up Naismith and it goes to West Campus, and then it comes around, so it's only going through Jayhawk Boulevard once. It is going to force some people to ride around, but that's a problem with loops. Short, small loops, at least they're not riding for that long. So, and it will still serve the rec center. There's, of course, as we know, there's going to be lots of residents down here with Downs and Stauffer Place and all that stuff going on down here in the Central District. Then there's Route 43. This is another one of those that, because of what was going on with the Central District and Irving Hill, we're putting it back to the original route, which is kind of a loop around the hill up there. And then the last, which is, we started Route 44 a while back. If anybody wants to scream at me about trying to understand this mess, there's a lot there to absorb. It's a difficult route. It does a lot of things. The university, what they decided to do is they started a Route 44, which ran later at night. And they wanted to increase their service on Safe Ride. To do that, they decided to discontinue the Safe Bus, throw those hours into Safe Ride. And now what are you going to do with the high volumes that are coming out of downtown, wanting to get back up to campus, like to the hill and stuff? And so that's how this came about. We're trying to get it as combo routing as we can. So Route 44 does all this stuff and goes out to here during the day, right, or early in the evening, and goes out to GSP and does this. Then at night, after 10 o'clock, it switches over to just doing the hill here, and actually goes in the opposite direction. Don't ask me why that happened. But then it does this and goes clear into downtown, does the piece on Tennessee and across 19th and back. So it's connecting the residence halls to downtown, which is kind of what the Safe Bus was there to do. So Safe Bus, as we know, it kind of goes away, it becomes this 44. How hard this is going to be for people to understand, we're going to find out. But I think it's difficult for me to understand sometimes looking at it, so I kind of wonder how it's going to be received.
How late does that run?
That'll run until 3 o'clock. It'll run like the Safe Bus, that blue dotted line version. So it'll do, the heaviest Safe Bus route was from downtown to Batesville. So we wanted to ensure that for sure. And there's no way we could carry that volume with Safe Ride because we only have maybe a dozen sedans that we can transport people on. You know, the load capacity on a 40-footer is about 40 people seated. So we needed those big buses on that. So.
Would it be less confusing if when the route changed, the number changed?
Yeah, we looked into that, and during our public hearing process, this is the way people seem to want it, and that's why we end up kind of gravitating toward it, and we looked at doing 2 different maps and 2 different numbers and all that stuff, and people were just like, well, what my biggest heartburn was, it goes in an opposite direction. At night, it kind of flips around and goes in the opposite direction. To me, that gets even more confusing. Now, during the day, you're standing on this side, at night, you have to there to catch it. So we'll see. This was vetted several times. We even went back and had some additional public meetings on campus to talk about this route because we really got concerned about it. And it was still very well received. So we'll see. You know, I will say that we've made mistakes in the past. We put service out there that didn't function for one reason or another, and we'll address it. We'll fix it right now, even if we have to go to the public and say, we made a mistake, let's do something different here, and we'll do that. So if this blows up on us, we have another way out. We will try to fix it another way. So. And that's it for the service changes, because we don't have anything more than Route 44. That was a lot. The amenities project that we have going on, we have an RFP out right now, which is due, the responses are due this Friday by 3 o'clock. What we're looking is to have a contractor that will buy shelters, benches, and trash receptacles, do site design and all that, do the construction, installation, and everything under this one project. What we've had a problem with amenities in the past is we can buy the amenities, it's very hard to get somebody to install those amenities. And then we're kind of having to lean on our public works people to do it, and they're not really, that's not their job to do those kind of things. So, and they do it so infrequently, it's not easy for them to do. So we're trying to do this way. What we're also looking at is the first wave of this is going to be like 12 shelters, 25 benches, and trash receptacles, along with some concrete. So we're trying to do some infill and concrete around our bus stops to make sure that we're taking care of those ADA issues and stuff out here. But then we're also looking at 2 optional years under this contract. So we can lock in for another couple of years to have the same company and the same operation going on for a couple more years. So if we decide we want to put another 12 shelters in next year, we can do that if we get a contract with them. So we're trying to make sure at least we have something for a few years. We won't have to struggle again. The first time we put in shelters in this community was we really ran into some problems. We did all the site design and everything in-house. Our engineers did all that work, so that was kind of separated. We had all that figured out really well, but then we bought the shelters, and then how are we going to get them installed? It's hard to go out and get a construction firm to do it. A handyman's not going to be able to do it. You're going to have to have a crane and some things to move some heavy pieces of metal around. So they've gotten really difficult for us to do, and it still is to this day. I mean, we end up having to rely on public works or somebody to do it for us. So that's it for training.
When would the amenities, the timeline for that, is that this year, or would that be?
It'll be this year. We'd like to get, and according to how long it takes to get the amenities, and that's part of why we haven't designated certain locations for the amenities yet. We want to get the pricing in and what it's going to cost to do, the prep work and all that kind of stuff. And then we can start picking and choosing about how to best spend that money. We know we're committed to 12 shelters. Some are larger, some are smaller. We're going to try to put some larger shelters at places like 31st Mile and some of the higher volume areas. So we needed some larger and better amenities at those locations.
Who's maintaining it?
We do. We have a contract to do garbage, to do cleaning and all that stuff. So we have a separate contract.
Can you
So the time frame, to get back to your question, time frame, it depends. It depends on what we end up doing. If it's more concrete work on the front end, then maybe we can get it done sooner. I don't know if we, if we have to do a lot of design work and stuff, it may take a while. That's going to be a determination we have to make after we get there.
Can you talk a little bit about how you prioritize the selections and how that process works with you and others?
A couple different ways we're prioritizing locations. And you will see, as we've all witnessed, we have what we call bus chairs sitting all over our community out there. And that is people, for whatever reason, decide to put chairs out and call them bus benches and start putting them out all over the place. We're not removing this. For whatever reason, we're not removing them, they're staying there. Amenities, the way we look at it, we have an amenities policy. This guy voted on it one time too. The amenity policy says if we have more than 25 boardings a day, that's people getting on the bus a day, then it justifies some kind of major investment in amenities, whether it's a bench or a shelter or whatever. That's how we start our process. There's other reasons to put amenities there. If it's an elderly facility or something and we want to put a shelter out there, we may make an exception to that kind of golden rule. So that's kind of what starts driving the process. Then we end up with easements and all these things. Can we get something in those spots? Because a lot of things we have to weigh in to do that. So that's really what drives the whole process. Is it starts out with the number of buildings with it. And what we often will get will be like in Haskell. The K-10 connector will come in at Haskell and 23rd, and you'll see 25 people get out the bus there and people, oh, that's such a busy location. You have to put out a shelter there. Nobody boards there. They all get off there. They're actually walking up Haskell to a parking ride at 19th and Haskell to get to their car. That's where the K-10 picks them up. They don't want to ride all the way into campus and wait to come all the way back out to 19th to get to their car. They really walk. They'll walk to their car. So it's about boardings. And if you think about it, the amount of boarding you start weighing, the cost-benefit analysis of how much money you're going to invest for a few passengers. You want to invest $10,000 for 3 people boarding in Delaware and 11th Street? Probably not. So, and the other thing that we look at is also we're trying to balance under Title VI. We have some equity and service that we have to provide under federal regulations. So we try to make sure that our amenities are spread out across our community. The way we've sought to do that, or the way we figured out how to do that, is we look at each route and do a percentage of stops on that route. How many amenities per, what percentage of amenities are on each stop. So what we're trying to do with this next installation is get every route up to 25% of the stops will have some kind of amenity. Now, some of those stops, of course, are going across campus, so there's shelters and benches and stuff on campus too. So, and then we do have privately stuff out there too, shelters and benches and things.
I was kind of wondering, for those like 11th and Delaware locations, do you have to meet a certain standard? I mean, some of the inventiveness you see is kind of good. When residents put a bench or something. Some of it doesn't look great. And some of it actually looks a little like it could be a little dangerous. Is there any kind of simple solution? Just a bench? Or when you started?
We have to set a standard. And some cities, and a few cities I know in Tennessee that I was working with, set a certain standard of saying, we'll allow you, if you're a property owner nearby, we'll allow you to adopt a stop and you can put a bench in there. But you have to have a certain kind of bench.
Yeah.
So one of our concerns with a lot of these benches are they're wood. When I was young, I used to get lots of wood. So, that's the first thing you start thinking about. Wood breaks, they're hard to maintain. You could get hurt with wood. And then who's going to maintain it? If if they put out a shower chair at a bus stop, does the city have to maintain that? And then if somebody adopts that, who is liable for that? Is that the city that's liable for it, or is that the person that put it out? So there's lots of issues you have to work through, and adopting stops sometimes gives you all those answers.
Well, I was thinking that the city would put out something that would be, reasonably cost-effective and wouldn't get splinters, that would be better than nothing.
Well, and there's a misconception too about amenities, is that, and I consider myself an avid transit rider, have been for most of my life. And amenities to somebody like me, there's a shelter at my bus stop that I go to just about every morning. In the last 3 years, I've been there 3 times. I know when the bus is coming. I don't get there to go hang out in the shelter. What I've always thought, it tends to be the people that don't ride transit see it from the outside and say,
Yeah.
oh, that person needs a shelter, needs a bench. And that's not necessarily what they want. They would rather have better service, not a bench or a shelter. They would rather have better service. And if it came 5 minutes earlier, they'd be happy with that. So,
Well, and the other thing to think about is we're always tweaking the routes. So if too many places, you're gonna have to take them up. When you put out a substantial shelter,
yeah, and that's what started this initiative, this grassroots initiative, is we were asked to put out amenities, and we've been bumping up against this transit center thing for 5+ years now. At the same time, we've been asked to put out more amenities, and we've always said, we're willing to put out more amenities, but if we start investing $6,000 to $10,000 in a location and then find out that once we change the route, that shelter's on the wrong side of the street, now what do we do? So is the timing right to do that? So we've always raised that question, and we've been reluctant to really put out a whole lot of amenities as a result until we get that kind of result.
Makes sense.
Anything else?
Do you have like a sense of how many, like you said, maybe this would be a contract that locks in a company for a few years. Is there kind of a list of 40 locations, 20 locations? Like, what's the sense?
Yeah,
of
we've
that?
prioritized, and some of that is based on the percentage of amenities per route and all that stuff. So we've kind of prioritized where we want to go with some of those. Pricing and all that stuff could kind of play out. But we have some locations that we need to upgrade, like 31st and I. We probably need to put a bigger shelter there, so we know some of that's happening. But we do have a listing of probably 40 locations that we're looking at. It's kind of in that queue. Some of them don't quite meet the criteria yet, but they're in the queue because sooner or later they will. We're going to continue to grow in ridership, so it's going to happen sooner or later. Maybe we can get out in front of some of those as we do. So, yeah, there's a pretty good list that we have. But we did go back to, and this goes to something else that we did a few years ago. We had a comprehensive operational analysis, which was the first time and a comprehensive COA is basically when a company comes in and looks at everything you do, and they show you what you're doing right, what you're doing wrong, all of that. But one of the things that they gave us was all the data about boardings and the lightings and all that stuff at every stop, which was the first time we really had a good picture of how active some of these stops are. So then it really did give us an opportunity to go in and make this list and go, when they did their study, here it is. So at least we had a snapshot of 18 months or so ago. And now if we need to go back in and see one that maybe had 18 boardings a day now, we can keep monitoring that over time, 1 or 2 stops, and try to keep our eye on it. So.
Anybody else?
Thanks, Bob.
I've never used this before. Usually it's set up.
Hey, Bob. Do you have any updates on the passes for the kids? The youth passes? This is the first year.
This is the first full year.
Yeah, we've had it for a full year. How's that worked out?
It's continuing to grow. I mean, what we're seeing is about a 17-18% increase every new year. So we're still into the first year on the semester passes.
Yeah.
But we're continuing to grow. I mean, it continues to gain some traction. We've been working with the schools a little bit more, trying to get them involved. The first year we just did the summer pass was, it was lackluster in a way. But then the second year, all of a sudden, it started taking off, and it's been So hopefully the semester stuff will go. So,
I got a quick one for Bob. Are you getting a lot of the KU bikes on the buses?
no.
No? None?
One, they're heavy. They're like 30, 35 pounds or so. And two, I'm not going to do that.
Okay.
So what do you think about we talked about having more bike racks co-located with the bus stops. Are you still thinking that's a good idea, or?
Yeah, as a matter of fact,
Lily, or? Oh, Spencer.
Spencer, yeah.
Spencer Dixon.
We've been kind of going back and forth here over the last week or two, trying to set up a meeting to have that discussion.
Okay.
And it does play into a lot of what we're doing with amenities too, because we already have some bike racks that we'd like to install, but if there are certain locations that we want to start focusing our energies to put out some converted use, then we'll do that too. So
Okay.
that's still in the direction.
Awesome. Hi, I'm Derek Rogers, Lawrence Parks and Rec Director. Giving an update first on the VO-Ride bike share MOU agreement that was just passed the other night. I went on the consent item, and you get all ready for this stuff and nobody asks any questions. So it is kind of nice to be able to hear talk about everything you planned for that nobody called you out on. One of the questions I get is, why do we need an agreement with VO-Ride to have bike share in Lawrence, Kansas? If you look around the country, a lot of cities have had issues with bike share, and right now it's electric scooters is the next up and coming thing, dockless. So by having an agreement, you can prevent, or you can be proactive, hopefully, in managing some of the issues that you would have in your right-of-way with bikes getting parked in the middle of a sidewalk, blocking pedestrians, possible safety hazards. So that's the whole idea of having geofences in the city and an MOU with the operator to try to prevent this. A little on bike share, it started out with an RFP through KU. Donna may have filled you in quite a bit on that. I believe there's a story this morning that said there was 8. I was thinking 7 applicants that applied to the RFP. VO-Ride was selected. My personal opinion of all the bikes, it's probably one of the best bikes you could have. It's geared low enough that hopefully if the kid brings one down from KU, they'll bike it back up. Albeit they may have to take 10th or 11th Street and be a little more strategic how they get back to campus. VO-Ride started out with 180 bikes up on KU. And if you look around KU, I drive across campus twice a day. They're still getting heavily utilized, even during the summer months, which surprises me. 180 bikes between the bike racks, and they geofence the whole campus area now, from what I can tell. You don't see that many bikes. It's like they couldn't have 180. The few times that bikes have come into the city, well, they come in the city more often than not proper than off campus. There's been very minimal issues that have had to be addressed from a park standpoint, that, hey, somebody left their bike down here in a park, how do we get it back to them? Their next rollout is another 180 bikes is what they want to do. And I believe they're going to probably start mainly on campus. We, in the MOU, gave them approximately 40 bike racks in the right-of-way in the city of Lawrence proper. And on the list, you'll see the locations. So that I think they were planning on approximately 40 bikes initially. From a city perspective, I'm less concerned with how many bikes, where they start a ride. I'm more interested on where they end the ride. So from one standpoint, I look at, okay, we got 40 bikes stationed here in Lawrence at dockless locations. The key is, what if 20 kids decide to ride 20 bikes down, and I'm taking the bus back up to campus? Now I've got 60. Now, do I have issues with overloading a bike rack? Can the public still park there? Are they getting left in a place they shouldn't? And now I've got people complaining that this is becoming a nuisance. But I think it's a good plan. The other thing that's interesting is I can show you a map of where they are downtown, but it's not going to be static. It's going to be dynamic, kind of like the bus routes. VO-Ride is going to look at the ridership, and they're going to say, okay, we've got a lot of people riding from, let's say, 9th in Massachusetts, and they're going somewhere, and they're coming back to 9th in Massachusetts. That bike rack's a great location. And maybe the one at City Hall, nobody's using it. Well, let's move it somewhere else, because their whole marketing plan is based on ridership. So if people aren't riding the bikes, they're not making money, they're not subsidized by KU and the city. So if they're gonna survive, they need the riders, so.
So is there anything in the contract with some van distribution that
There's not. That being said, the number of bikes that go on a bike rack, talking to the planning department, and I never knew this, there are so many bike racks, to hold so many bikes, they're supposed to be per location. And I believe over at the library, for example, there really isn't quite enough, and I would have thought that they have a bunch. So how many of those bikes should be designated for VioRide bike share? So it should be a number, because the last thing I would like to see is, let's say there's a bike rack that holds 2 and 4 people decide that I want to end my ride, I want my credit card to stop being charged, so I'm going to start stacking them on top of each other. So we can set the how many numbers, you go down the 9th of Mass, there's 2 bikes there, and it says, oh, you can't end your ride here. Well, maybe you have to cross the street to where the bus station is on the other side, on the west side of 9th of Mass, and park it there.
Can you tell us a little more about the bike racks? Are they a special rack? I've seen in Kansas City how they do theirs and a couple other places, and it seems like there's different approaches for how bike share works. And are these the big bike racks that are kind of created visible, going to maybe some comments that Steve's made recently about creating culture change by using, what might seem like insignificant things like a bike turn lane with a bike light. Are these racks ones that are visibly going to create that sense of, wow, this is a bike community? Or are they just the same old racks we've always seen?
Answer your question, Ward, the same old racks we've always seen.
Okay.
So there's 2 philosophies. You have Smart Dock and you have Smart Bike. So Smart Dock was a big station, you had to hold them down, and there was an expense. So the companies have switched over to Smart Bike technology. So now it's less about that dock. It's, you put a geofence around where you want to park. So we'll put a geofence around Riverfront Park and their bike corral. And the GPS is going to be close enough on the bike to say, yeah, we're within 10 feet, they're ending their ride, they probably put it where they should. And they can end their credit card charge.
Okay. So will there be a sign that people are able to know that they're in that geofence, or will the bike tell you that it's inside that?
The way you tell, if you go to your app, whether it be iPhone or an Android user, look up VioRide, VioRide, download the app. You don't even have to put a penny in. You have to put a phone number in, create a password, and it shows you this great, it'll show you every bike in the city of Lawrence, where it is, and if it's available. You say, I want to rent that bike, you tap on it. You'll also see, I tried to pull, I was thinking that, I didn't know if that would work or not.
Scoot it down a little bit.
And if you don't have a smartphone, are you able to still use the system?
They're working on an RFID reader, so you could walk into Dillon's or maybe in a rec center and prepay $5, and now you got something that you can scan. I don't think they're there yet, but there is a
No.
different way that they're trying to.
No, like texting. I'm just saying that people that have the older style phones where they can text, but they can't.
That was supposed to work, and I haven't tried it yet. I'm waiting for them. You can kind of see the squares of what a geofence looks like. If you go up back on campus, maybe. There you go. That blue box. There's one right there. That's perfect. That's a geofence. So you know, okay, if I get in that loop on College Drive, I can end my ride there at a bike rack.
So does it need to be at a rack, or can you just leave it somewhere in
You're
that?
supposed to leave it in a rack. And
Okay.
so philosophically, KU is pretty much open. They initially started off with where they put the geofence. Now they've opened up the geofence all on campus. So VioRide's like, well, why don't you open up all the city for that? I went, nah, I'm not quite there yet. Prove to me that I'm not gonna get a bunch of bikes in the middle of Massachusetts Street and I'll have a Dan Dannenberg walking down the street going, this is terrible.
Yeah.
Because he's my canary in a coal mine. If I hear him complain, they need to step their game up.
Is the geofence a physical wire? Is it, it's a GPS deal? Okay.
Yeah, and I think the only place you're really gonna see that fence, he's creating them now on the map.
Yeah, there's one there.
There's one out here
Yeah, there it is. That's down off the East 9th Street corridor, I believe. I think he's got an office down there, so that was one of the first ones that they put out.
So these bikes that are on, that we're seeing now, these are all ready to go? If I wanted to go get on them right now, I can do that?
Yeah, you can reserve it.
Yeah, use this, it's the QR code here. Use that and scan the code on the bike and it'll unlock the bike.
All the bikes will be red and blue, so that should reduce the confusion on, at one time they talked about maybe they'd do the Be Alright blue. Well, the bikes are just gonna keep mixing like M&Ms, so why even confuse the public?
Yeah. And you can, I think when you reserve it, it'll, was it 10 minutes that it gives you?
I don't recall on that.
So if you, like that bike, it tells you it's a mile away, it'll take you 22 minutes to walk, and if you go to reserve bike, I don't know if that,
Is this a coordinated contract with Kayuu?
you have 10 minutes to get to the bike essentially. So
I
it
got to
starts
sit
at-
on the RFP, but when you start to bring attorneys and lawyers into it, all of a sudden they put the blinders on and they go, no.
Yeah.
That was the whole idea, was we're gonna be able to piggyback, we do an MOU with KU,
Uh-huh.
KU did that, and we'll be golden.
Uh-huh.
And then the attorneys get involved and say, we don't care about that, we want our own agreement, we'll be all right. So, that's what slowed us way down in this process. I was hoping to have this done back in May, took till July.
Well, it's fortunate that it ended up being the same vendor, I would imagine. Like you said, it was several submitted proposals.
True, and what
Could have been
precludes-
complicated if it was two different vendors in our community.
Or 3 or 4,
Yeah.
and that's what's going on in Fort Lauderdale, or it was Miami, I think, had the big deal.
Wow.
And they come in, some bikes, they won't talk to a city, or let's say the city endorses Be Alright, and they'll come in and they'll throw all these bikes, 1,000 bikes into your city to compete. So at least with what we got now, if they met the standards of what Be Alright just did, then we can do a license agreement. But they just can't move their bikes in our right of way like they have in other cities. So other cities have gotten more stringent. In some cases, Public Works has had to pick up all these bikes that have been left all over the place and they throw them in the trash.
That's the potential issue with the bird scooters in the city. Because they just, they just pulled into town, huge one morning, they were saying about bird scooters. And Bird is famous for going in and asking for forgiveness later. Yeah. And there'd be scooters everywhere in the right of way.
So they throw them away?
That, and I forget where it was, but with Bird, there was a bunch of them getting thrown in lakes and stuff. Pottery Lakes been getting thrown up in scooters a bunch of times.
Kansas City does have the scooters. I've seen them. They're starting to be problems in other communities. What they'll do is if you take a scooter home, it's like a bike share, it's dockless and it's smart. You charge it up overnight, they give you a $5 credit. If you charge it up overnight and you take it to where they want it to be stationed, they'll give you a $20 credit. But I've also seen the pictures kind of like the Lime bikes where they're just leaving them in the grass, they're all over the place, and then the community's getting upset. So it's kind of like Uber and some other things. There will always be new technology, things will change. But this is leading to new advancements.
And they can tell, like, if a bike isn't checked in, they can tell where it's at, right? And police can go and,
Yes, so if a student says, hey, I'm going to take one, I'm going to throw it in my apartment. Pretty soon he gets a knock at the door and says, we're looking for a smart bike. He goes, I don't have one. Well, the GPS says it's in your room.
And the system in Topeka, I remember we did a tour of that a few years ago. They seem to spend a lot of time replacing or recharging batteries, and I'm curious how that works here. Is that
There is,
problem, or?
there's solar on the lights, the tail lights, and the computer. I do believe that maintenance does have to charge, like every 2 weeks, they've got to do something above and beyond what the solar is what I think Spencer told me.
I mean, they were just, a lot of their staff time seemed to be running around finding the bikes, and once the battery dies, I guess the GPS kind of stops.
You would
So they
think.
just have like a last known location.
There's a time frame, and last I heard from Be Alright, initially what we were told was if they don't get it to a geofenced area, the end of bike ride, the credit card keeps getting charged. From what I hear now, it's a $10 penalty for not taking it there. I really don't care how they do it, I just want to make sure that the bikes are picked up. So, and then that's the other piece of this, we need to train the community. You don't call the city and say, hey, there's a bike share bike over here that's broken or needs fixed or needs moved. You need to call the company, and I've got the 1-800 number if you're interested, or that's actually on the back of each bike.
What do you think the odds of that happening are? I imagine the city's gonna get a lot of calls.
Yeah, and I've already had a few people saying, hey, what about this, or where are they gonna be? And the key is to get them to download the app. I tried to go online, and you go online and look, VeoRide's got a good website, veoride.com, but it doesn't have a login reserve from their site.
How often are they going to evaluate these rack locations, and is there, like, all these locations already have racks, or they're gonna be installing?
Right now, they're using existing, like they've been talking with transit, adding more. I'm looking at, can I add more in certain locations? Doesn't mean they can't go to an apartment complex. Now with planning, I'm just gonna use Dillon's on Mass as a great example. Their bike rack really ain't conforming, so the bike rack's there, but if they wanna use VeoRide as something they wanna advertise, they're gonna have to change their bike rack. It's like a $50 site fee they'll have to pay and do some work. Doesn't mean they can't do it, but it would be a pedestrian hazard where it is now. So VeoRide, the general manager, we've talked a little bit. There's ways to do it, but I've also mentioned, an apartment complex. I guess, well, maybe an apartment complex don't want to do it. Well, do you want your bike in the apartment complex? Or would you rather have it up by a bus transit station? To me, I think I'd rather co-locate in the right-of-way in different areas around town. I haven't tried one of the bikes on the levee. With geared low, like I said, they can get up a hill, they're probably sturdy enough. The tires are sealed, all the cables are enclosed, they have anti-theft bolts all over them. That bike met so many of the requirements of what a bike should have. It's got a double kickstand, which means they shouldn't hopefully be left laying on their sides. I believe Kayuu is looking at removing the Jayhawk off that triangle area and may sell some advertisement. I know Explode Orange is looking into that.
I'd heard there might be electric bikes. Is that already happening, or is that just
That hasn't, we're closer, which brings up a whole bunch of new issues. At some point, we've talked to the multimodal committee that we'll probably be coming back to the Transportation Commission about, we need to upgrade our ordinances. Our ordinances go back to 79 and 80, some updates were in 96, and the technology just wasn't there. And a great example is, and there's an ordinance in the bike section, you get in a bicycle wreck and you have more than $50 damage, your bylaw is supposed to report that as an accident. I hit the curb and bend my wheel, I'm over $50. So we need to figure out what needs to be in there, speed limits, power ratings. So there's some things, to do it right, I think that I'd be ordinance. But in the initial stages, I think I'm leaning towards policy for parks and recreation on multimodal paths, parks and whatnot. Talking to Randy Larkin, one of the attorneys, he says we follow this Kansas state statutes. He goes, you don't need to change the motorized vehicle ordinance for multi-use paths because it's all covered here. It says this, and this. So I go, okay, I've got a gas moped. Can I be up on?
Yeah.
And that's the kind of things I want to stop. But e-bikes, the Kansas statute, which I agree with, says no more than 20 miles per hour speed, of which a 170-pound rider would have on flat level ground. Horsepower would be no greater than 1 horsepower or 1,000 watts. It's very specific, but it also says you can have trikes. I get that question, can you have trike bikes on the path? There was an issue in 2011 that passed the DOJ ruled on, it's called Other Personal Mobility Devices for Handicapped people. They can call, they get an ATV or golf cart, and that is their mobility device. And they can go on any trail they want. There's things that look like tanks. That's a personal mobility device. So I've already had one of the requests, hey, my disabled mom has an ATV, can she go on your trails? Oh, let's come in and talk. The reality is I found some guidance from another city that I really liked. I ran it by Dot Neri and Bob McKessick. That basically, if it's a noise issue, it's a safety issue, you go on a bike trail usually for peace and quiet. You know, there's people riding with music. But it allows me to prevent what's considered an off-road vehicle, a snowmobile, other things that somebody may want to call a personal mobility device. Or they want to take an ATV in the South Park to listen to the concert tonight. I can stop that.
I remember that came up in back when the Complete Streets policy was being developed, and I remember there was some edit to like some of the vehicle types that were included in that. And it was because of this kind of notion that a lot of things could serve as ways for people to be mobile. But it seems problematic if you think about, someone with a motorized device zooming along on a sidewalk next to someone who's, walking that may not see it coming. There's still a lot of challenges of people that are just on a regular bike and someone walking if they don't, announce they're coming up on their left or anything. So.
I don't know too much about e-bikes, but aren't they designed so the power doesn't kick in unless the bike senses that you need the power? So you can't just turn them on,
There's
can
three
you?
different classes of the e-bike. One is, as you pedal more, it assists more. As you back off the pedaling, it backs down. That's
Okay.
class 3, I believe. And they've got one, which is class 2, which is actually a throttle. You turn it. My daughter had one of those 5 years ago. Had pedals that you could store in the back, looked like a moped. It was electric. It met every state thing. And at 13, she could drive that to Sunflower School. Kept the pedals in the back. And then I can't remember exactly what the class 1 is. The concern I have with e-bikes, in Kansas, anyone under, basically, there's no age limit to use them. You still got the helmet law, so the helmet law should be reevaluated. But let's say a 12-year-old kid, maybe pedals a bicycle 12 miles an hour, can now get on an e-bike that goes 20 miles an hour. What's the potential for an accident? I see some other rules that are going to have to be developed. Maybe the riding e-bike, everybody under 18 has to have a helmet. There needs to be something somewhere that's going to have to be looked at through probably a task force and address some of these issues when we get to that point.
I know we need to grow in and understand this better, but I just see, I guess, the comment about the culture shift. And are e-bikes going to help that or not? I mean, there are plenty of bikers that show pretty bad behavior. And if you put people on e-bikes, how much is that going to accelerate, no pun intended, bad behavior on a bike? And how's that going to affect how this community feels about active transportation in general? I don't know.
I think in
They're great questions.
New York City, a few years back, they started to, be serious about enforcing their laws for all users.
Mm-hmm.
And people on bikes got ticketed for violating laws. So
Yeah.
I think that's generally what frustrates people that don't ride bikes when they're driving and they see someone on a bike that decides to, just
Be
jog,
dumb. Yeah.
go across the road in a completely inappropriate, unlawful way.
So if I set bike policies, let's say for a multimodal path or somebody's bicycling on a levee and they're doing something that is against policy, let's say they're driving a motorized, well, that would work because we do have the ordinance for that. But they do something, we can tell them it's wrong, but law enforcement couldn't enforce it unless it's an ordinance.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what I've seen is the majority of people that bike and live healthy lifestyles, they read the rules that they're put out there somewhere and they obey them. And then they're their own self-critiquing entity. If you're out biking on the levee and you see somebody doing or using something they're not, most of the time somebody's going to yell at them. And a great example of that is the mountain bike club. They go down the levee in their vehicles and they maintain it. Somebody that doesn't know which vehicles are, they yell and scream at those guys and get that thing off the levee.
I did that. Until I realized, that there's signage on the side of their truck. And I'm like, oh, well, it's okay.
So I think self-enforcing will cover most of it. You will have people that will do, every now and then, I'll see the ATV on the levee, or I'll see it on the K-10 bypass, or horses on the levee. They're not supposed to be there. You better post it.
I saw there was a user agreement. I assume there's some kind of, agreement to release liability from VO Ride or whoever's providing these bikes if somebody gets injured. Is that?
Liability, they have to enter the agreement, they had to have at least $1 million insurance, and the liability belongs to VO Ride because it's not a city-run business. They're just operating in our right-of-way for profit.
So is there a franchise fee that they pay for that, right? Or any other payment to the city?
No payments to the city. What KU and the city both liked was most cities subsidize the opportunity to have a bike share. Topeka is a great example. Topeka bought those bikes. I don't know if they pay in maintenance every year. But I bet you it's easily north of $100,000. So if you're in the city, got one of their bike feasibility study goals. There was also a Horizon 2020, Transportation 2040 goal, and we got it for no fee. Now, I hope VO Ride makes it. Our agreement is year to year and expires March 31st of 19. It can be extended year to year, so it keeps them honest and performing.
I think it'd be a good idea, maybe September, October, to do one of our work sessions on those bikes. Is that doable, do you think, or?
Well, we talked about doing it this last time, but it wasn't in the city yet, and we had some issues
Mhm.
with being able to say that you guys could ride those bikes. So, we'll have to look at our schedule and see if we've got some time then, or if we can roll it into next spring's
Mhm.
bike ride, because I think we want to make that a yearly thing. So, I
suppose
think we can just see what we
Yeah.
have for study sessions, and if we have an available one, I think it'd be a good idea. Go ride the bikes and stuff.
Of course, we can just go do it on our own.
Yeah,
anytime.
no, but I think it'd be good. It's just whether, we'll just have to see with our schedule and what we have on it. But I
Right.
think if nothing else, maybe we can encourage next spring if we do another one that we started we can coordinate probably with VO Ride and get enough bikes in one location
Yeah,
and get everybody on one of those. Because I rode one in Atlanta. It wasn't a VO Ride. And it was really heavy and hard to ride.
I did.
So I'd be interested to see what these are like because I mean, it was fun, but it was definitely tiring.
Mhm.
So I've heard these are quite a bit lighter.
They're geared low enough. The gearing's internal to the hub, the brakes are internal to the hub. We rode them at the KU parking garage next on Fieldhouse, and it went up the hills just fine. There's another bike company that would have been great if you're in California, it was Southern California, and you're flat, because they went really fast, but it just killed you trying to pedal. You couldn't get it geared low enough to make it back up the hill. It was like, this ain't gonna work.
Is it just a single gear?
7-speed.
7-speed, yeah.
Yeah.
Are there specifications for the fit for a rider? Like, are they able to be used by, youth, or is there a weight
As long as
limit
they
to
can log
it?
in, there's no specification. It goes back to the helmet law, anybody under.
Like the adjustability is what I'm kind of.
Oh, the height, yeah, you're fine.
How
The seat
does that-
goes way down, it goes way up. It seemed to have a wide range of height built.
I'm just curious if it'll catch on with younger.
Mhm.
Right now it's KU. And just curious about the youth.
Well, I get curious about Lawrence High in the context of 21st Street, Bike Boulevard,
Mhm.
and, the parking apparent perceived parking conflict between the bike boulevard and high school parking lot on 21st Street.
We could encourage VO-Ride to get at some locations at the school
Is,
as they do their renovation.
Yeah.
does the contract allow us to look at their data in terms of the ridership to?
It is supposed to, the RFP with KU, and I believe, talking to KU, they have shared some data. I haven't seen any yet. He's busy trying to set up his fencing, but I believe that was supposed to be shared.
That seems like it's really would be useful when we're trying to make bike investments, you know.
Absolutely. Any other questions?
I'd just like to keep up to date, so I don't know if you're, you know, creating any memos for the city commission or anything, but it'd be, I'd appreciate just being looped in as a transportation commission. This is a pretty big deal, you know, a lot of communities that have done this, it's kind of an indication of their coming of age in the bike culture kind of thing, which we've talked about on occasion. I think we still have a pretty low ridership. When we looked at the bike-friendly community thing, the percentage is still pretty low. But it seems like these are the things that kind of set communities apart. So
There's over 60 bike shares in Lawrence, according to the 2016, or around the nation. They were tied closer to universities, according to the 2016 study, I believe it was. What else was on that? The other thing with e-bikes, it tends to be more the older people that are handicapped that might have a disability tend to ride them more. And they say even though it's electric, they're still getting a lot more benefit out of not doing anything.
Right. Well, I know Marilyn Hall, when we were in Vancouver for the Pro Places conference a few years ago, she went out and got an e-bike, you know, from a rental shop, and she said it was just amazing how it made her feel the confidence to be able to get anywhere she would want to go, without the fear that she'll end up in a space where she may not, you know, be able to manage. So, and you know, that just hadn't occurred to me. Like that would be kind of liberating. That you thought, yeah, you wouldn't be worried about getting too far away or finding yourself, oh, here's a big hill that I can't manage. You know, that sort of thing.
I think the Journal World did one on a lady that said she hadn't biked in 10 or 20 years, and now the bike share's got her doing that again.
Yeah.
And you had mentioned the parking, by putting them out by parking garages on Vermont or New Hampshire. You know, my hope is that people go, you know, I don't have to park downtown. Yes, I can park a block over. I've got a year subscription, so my rides are all less than 30 minutes. What a way to get downtown easier. So, my hope.
Last question. So the bike racks, nothing stops non-VO ride bikes from also being parked there, right?
Exactly.
So it really could help everybody. I mean, if there are other bike racks out there for VO ride, I could use the app to figure out where a bike parking is.
Exactly.
Because
So
that's not easy
you go
to
to the
do.
riverfront and you're going to look at bike racks full. It was limited. There's 8 stalls and 2 are VO ride and you can't put a bike there. Well, I know that right next door at City Hall, there's a bike rack for VO ride. I can just go a little bit farther over a few, maybe 100 feet, and I can park it.
Thank you.
Well, just as a footnote, Derek is running neck and neck with David Hamby on the National Bike Challenge.
Yeah, you are doing.
That's pretty impressive, because
It is.
David Hamby rides
It is.
all the time,
It is.
even when it's 10 below.
I think there's somebody that's really kicking you pretty good. There's one guy that's way up, and then you and David are,
Okay, I need like the, I
That
just do it
person's
for
probably-
exercise.
Maybe they don't work or something, because you guys ride a lot. I don't know how anybody can
Well-
bypass you.
that's how I get my mileage, so.
Hey, we've got to kind of move because
Sure.
Derek.
John has
Thank you, Derek.
Derek's got one more thing.
One more
But
thing.
John has a small little, probably 10-minute TA thing at the end here, so we want to make sure to reserve time for that. So if we can real quick hit on some of the loop amenity stuff with Derek. But we got probably about 10 minutes on that topic.
Okay.
That's all right. I know.
The bike share is exciting stuff.
Yeah, that's cool. We have our meeting tonight at Carnegie Hall at 6 p.m. It's on signage. This goes back to the grant we got from Live Well Lawrence We have basic signs to put out on the loop. We're looking for public comment. Veterinary, Bob Cusick, Ray Petty, they've got some additional ideas. The grant was for $9,000. We put some extra money into it. So the signage, when you go 17 miles, it goes quick. But we will try to put some gradient, see what we can't do there. I'm pretty impressed with the signs. It'd be more the Lawrence Loop sign, what section of the route it is, what park, mileage. Mileage helps out with the dispatcher, if somebody gets injured, falls. And at some point, and I know the signs for the request are gonna come, hey, if I'm on the trail, why don't you give me a, hey, if you get off the trail and you go 2 miles towards Mass, you'll be at Chipotle on the 9th Street. You know, the direction signs are gonna come. Budget only went so far.
Nice to get a little artwork worked in there too, so,
Yeah.
public work, public art.
So you have samples of what the, like, options are? That'd be.
Yeah, we will have, the signs are all built, and then they're showing where some of the locations tonight around the loop. And so the locations could be fluid, and somebody says, hey, I don't know, that's not really a good location. And other sign ideas. And then the Lawrence Loop, if you didn't watch the commission meeting last night, we've actually got money now allocated to at least try to finish a section, major section of the loop, 5 years.
And also the restroom.
The restroom we're still planning on one at Burroughs, and we're planning on one at Garfield. So
Where are you looking at Burroughs? It's it's right by that art, right? Is that 15?
yeah, it's at 15th. You know what that building is, the Martin Building? That is scheduled to be demolished. And initially we were thinking we were going to put it up high by the roundabout. And there were some people that said, hey, for example, my handicapped mother, we park down there, but she's immediately going to go to the restroom. That's too far away. So we're going to move it down somewhere by the Parnell Park where the playground area is. And
I appreciate that. I think if you have little kids and you can go to the playground, there's a place to go to the bathroom, that's great.
You just gotta put a sign on up on the trail that kind of.
points to the restroom.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Be the first wave of these things.
Yeah.
and get rid of that porta john. And then it's in the 2023 CIP, that's 5 years is so far out. And I told East Lawrence and Brook Creek Neighborhood Association that it's hard to tell what's going to happen with that. A spray park, splash pad, the goal is to still get it down there, but there may be issues with, can you put the water tanks below the ground there, or do we have to go above ground with the water, so. Okay.
Sounds good.
Thank you. Thanks.
Yeah, it's in there. I pulled up the presentation.
Good.
Splash park.
It's open, John, if you go down, move down to the...
Right there. You ready? All right. So I just want to give an update. KDOT's got the program called the Transportation Alternatives Program. So that'd be coming down the pikes here. Just wanted to provide a heads up. So just a quick overview. It is federal monies that go through KDOT. The money's got to be for surface transportation, so no flying bicycles, I guess. Non-traditional transportation projects, so that it's not your typical road and bridge, it's more your pedestrian, non-motorized, maybe historic, archaeological, safe routes to schools, scenic environmental type projects. It is a competitive selection, so there's a limited pot of money available, and I'll show you how they split that out. We have been pretty successful in the recent past getting some of these monies between Safe Routes to School last year and the 19th Street underpass. I think it's close to $2 million that KDOT dedicated to Lawrence projects. So definitely a good source of revenue. And of course we had our match on top of that. So as far as eligible type projects, ped bike, safe routes,
converting old railroads to trails, scenic overlooks, historic preservation, vegetation management, stormwater mitigation, wildlife management. As far as what they won't give you money for, like signing, like standalone signing type projects, wayfinding, landscaping, public art, administrative expenses, typically acquisition of properties, not participating. So transportation museums, I guess, they've funded those in the past, no longer.
So when they did that Brookdale sign, was that? Sign,
The Breezdale Monument
Yeah,
sign, yeah, that was the TA project.
Okay.
Now, you can have signing as part of your project or landscaping as part of your
It
project.
was a historic.
Yeah, it's not the main point of your project, if that makes sense. So as far as the funding, the pot is about $7 million after they take some off the top for the Wichita and Kansas City areas. That's what the TMA is. And then the recreational trails program through wildlife and parks, they've scraped off their cut. And so what's left is about $7 million. And so they split that about $3.5 million for any part of the state. And then for all the rest of us that aren't Kansas City and Wichita, they split out into two groups. So the 5,000 to 200,000 is where we fit in. So all in all, I guess the pot of money that we could compete for would be, what about just over 5 million? So just for FYI, and to think we got about 2 million last year, I guess it's almost 40% of everything they handed out. So that's, or what we would have been eligible to be for, so that's pretty positive. Now, the Safe Routes to School, there's two different types of funds that they hand out. So we've already done, I think, a phase 1 in previous years. Last year they funded a phase 2. The difference is, phase 1's having a plan, phase 2 is the actual building the plan. So that, I think it was like $396,000 they gave last year for our Safe Routes to School. I think we've got probably another bunch of projects we could add to that this year. So I think that's potential phase 2, and then the non-Safe Routes to School will be your standard TA type project. So there's no maximum funding on that, where the Safe Routes to School you're limited to $400,000. So it's 80-20 match, and then all the engineering, the right-of-way, utility relocation, all that is on top of our 20% match. So they'll go through and they'll score all these projects, and I won't go through all these, but basically there's a comprehensive review and a category review. So the comprehensive review is for all the different kinds of projects, and then the category review is specific. So if you want a Safe Routes to School project, there's different criteria just for that category, or your historic, there's different criteria for that. So it kind of boils down to like exposure, like how many people would we expect to use this facility, et cetera, et cetera. So as far as timeline, of course, today is in orange. We just got the call for projects last month. KDOT did a little training last week, and then so we'll be looking, probably in August to come back and say, hey, these are our list of projects that we'd like to move forward with, and take to City Council for their approval to develop our applications. So there's not a lot of time between when City Council says, yep, we want you to apply for these 3 projects or whatever it is, to the time the applications are due to KDOT September 10th. So we want to have pretty, if you have ideas and things, I think that's kind of why we're throwing this out now, that you can think about that and ruminate on that before, the next Transportation Commission, so that you kind of have thoughts.
I didn't catch, that's the wrong date for the next one. That's the study session. August 6th is the regular meeting.
Okay.
So
yeah.
I didn't catch that when I reviewed this. I apologize.
So August 6th, I guess.
August 6th will be
Here's the
when,
Typo and readiness.
so we'll bring the
The slide was
list. What's that?
spelled- Readiness was spelled without an A.
Thank you.
Yeah, readiness.
So it looked like red, like the color.
Should we bring our own projects too?
Well, we're gonna recommend
We got something.
projects. we've got some ideas
There's some plans
that
put in
we're
place.
working on putting together.
Right.
So, not to say you can't have other ideas, certainly, but
Okay.
we also will come with some,
So they'll do all their criteria and scoring and everything here in September, October, and then as early winter timeframe, they'll select and award projects. So then right after 2019, if we do get awarded a project, we go out and find our consultant and get moving. So our next steps, we want to narrow that list down. We don't want to submit 10 applications. It's a lot of effort. So I think we're probably looking at maybe 3. Is that sort of the idea? And it can be, like the loop, for example, let's say, throw that out there. If we have 3 loop projects, we can combine that into one application. So, hey, this is priority 1, 2, 3. Priority 1 cost X, priority 2 cost Y, et cetera, et cetera. So if they want to fund, we're asking for $2 million. If they see they can fund a third of our project as a standalone phase for $800,000, that gives them options to give us money. So that's the idea. So council's got to approve, we have to have a resolution of support to submit to KDOT. The MPO has to give us a support document. And then, of course, letters of support from the community are a big factor in KDOT's decision. So, if you're a transportation commissioner and you want to say, hey, this is important to our community, or you got a bike advocate or a pet advocate or AARP or whoever, is really gunning for that project, those are all helpful as we put in our application process. And then we'll put all that in our application and develop estimates for the projects we want and submit those to KDOT. So that's, I think I just went over some of that. We do have to have a pretty tight scope and budget, so there's a fair amount of effort to develop this thing for each project. And then that's it. Any questions for now?
You might go back to the eligible list.
Yeah.
Thank you. What is the safe routes for non-drivers? I haven't seen that one.
Yeah, I think that's a new subcategory under the most recent federal transportation program that deals with non-drivers, which would be, of course, kids, but also disabled and elderly. So improvements on facilities that they would use.
Like, under the safe routes category, the 400,000 max, is this then back on the other side? Like,
Yeah, I think
No
safe
max?
routes for non-drivers would be on the no max, where the safe routes to school would be the 400 max.
interesting. There's been some work on the, Derek left, but there's a Safe Routes to Parks initiative that's been endorsed by the National Recreation Parks Association, and it's got, not a lot of traction just yet, but I wonder, what KDOT's looking for evidence of readiness. that you
Yeah,
can have
and
a
what the difference between
Safe
that
routes for
and a
non-drivers.
regular bike ped project would be.
Just curious if that would be there separately, called out like that. I've seen other efforts like Safe Routes for Seniors, but nothing's really gotten the brand that Safe Routes to School has captured.
Right.
So. I think the park seems like a really good, next step of that Safe Routes notion. So, and that would take some work to, I don't know. I mean, if it's under the MAC, there's no cap category. I'd be curious what KDOT would be looking for us to call it a Safe Routes.
Right, and you mentioned the previous study, I think that's where we missed out previously on some other projects we had submitted on, where they said, well, it doesn't seem like you have a really defined goal in mind here,
Yeah.
where if you do have that defined goal and plan, it makes it a lot easier for them to step in and hand you a check.
Could a
Yep.
bike boulevard be considered? I mean, it's ped bike.
I think the thing is, I believe you're supposed to address pedestrian and bike in the same project, correct? Isn't that
I have to read through the criteria.
That's what Jessica has told me, so we've discussed and we wanted to kind of see with KDOT whether if you do a bike facility and then you improve the pedestrian facilities by doing ADA compliance and those type of things, does that qualify?
Right.
Is that competitive, I guess? I don't know, but I had that discussion with Jessica.
I don't know if they've done bike boulevards. I think they've added bike lanes on streets before in other communities.
Yeah, and they've done.
Without a pedestrian?
But I believe she
It may
said
have
they've
included
always
sidewalk
been
improvements,
pedestrian and
but-
bike. Like they'll stripe bike lanes and build sidewalk.
But
Not Manhattan got like, or maybe it's, I think we got like $1 million for implementing their bike plan one time.
mhm.
Did that have pedestrian?
I don't believe so. But yeah, I think that was Cyclers 2 ago, and they got some money to do that. I think that was out of TA.
It was like pretty big.
One thing that I would just mention is that, as John said, we're going to put together a different list of projects that we could submit for to get some feedback on. So we appreciate you guys once we send that agenda out to look over it thoroughly. Ask us any questions ahead of the meeting if you have any questions. We're going to probably give some pros and cons to all the different type of projects as it would relate to the scoring, because we want to submit projects that would score well. And all the program details for the scoring is on the KDOT website. If you guys are really interested in getting into the details on how they score different projects. And we never really know what after they award the projects, where we ranked in the scoring. They'll say you get the project or you don't. And these are the things, they'll tell you some things that you can improve on with your application, so you don't necessarily know, well, it ranks 12 out of 30 or whatnot. But we do want to think about those things when we apply for the project, the different criteria, and it's always important to be on a regional plan that's on an approved plan, and the city has the funds to do the project. So we'll present some of those different, I guess, pros and cons of the different type of projects at the August meeting. But if there's other potential projects that you want us to discuss at the meeting or look at, please give us a heads up and we'd be happy to discuss it, because we'd like to get some recommendations at that August, was it August 9th or August 6th? That August meeting from the Transportation Commission to take to the City Commission in August, so that we can get this in by September the 10th, I think. So.
I think the obvious one would be more safe routes. I mean, we've gotten 2 of those infrastructure grants already. So it seems like
August
they're kind of eager to fund that kind of work.
Yeah,
and there's
I would,
plenty of work.
we've applied, we've gotten now 3 safe routes projects, the phase 1 planning and then 2 phase 2 construction projects. So I think that would seem to be one that would score really well. We've had, I think we've done successful projects here, and they also see that, and that factors into their scoring. So when we put the applications, submit the applications to KDOT, we also need to rank the applications too. So that's something that we'll need some feedback from the Transportation Commission on what should be our highest ranked project or application, and the second and the third.
So this is just real quick, this is, if you Google KDOT TA, you can find their Transportation Alternatives website. If you really want to get in the weeds, but this is from their definitions. Bike and ped is sidewalks, walkways, or curb ramps, bike lane striping, wide paved shoulders, bike lane, or bike parking, bus racks, traffic calming, off-road trails, bike and ped bridges and underpasses, ADA compliance. And then the safe routes for non-drivers would be infrastructure and accommodation for children, older adults, individuals with disabilities to access daily needs. So that would be like parks and, or a community building, or whatever resource that was.
So, like, we don't really have a plan for that right now.
Well,
I would think we would use our
MPO.
our pedestrians, we have our prioritization policy. I would think if we have high scoring projects on that, those are generally around shopping areas, parks, those type of things. So I think we could use that justification to say, hey, this ranks You know, it was one of the highest ranked projects on our non-motorized prioritization policy that was adopted by the Transportation Commission, that type of thing, so.
That policy doesn't refer to parks though.
But our policy, I believe, uses parks as one of the scoring criteria as far as a buffer around for looking at, do you know what I'm saying? Like when we're looking at how they score, parks is one of the, parks is pedestrian generator is one of the pedestrian generators mentioned, along with transit stops and, you know, community facilities and those type of things. So I think we can kind of tie it together. To really, it's going to probably be the same type of projects that we'll be recommending for the general TA projects.
But the fact that we've done an analysis for the whole city is, I think, beneficial.
Yeah, and we have a pedestrian priority network, and we have a bicycle priority network, and all of those things, so.
I guess to make it, I have that called out separately from just the generic ped bike facilities is intriguing to me. And I wonder if speaking to the children, older adults, and people with disabilities is like what distinguishes that.
Yeah, I think you get points too for being multi-component, so it doesn't have to be just one category or the other. It could draw from, you know, multiple categories and have multiple components.
This issue with the Tennessee Street, or Tennessee, couldn't he cross towards the swimming pool and library? That in the neighborhoods ask for the rectangular rapid flashing beacons. That wouldn't really be very expensive to do, but it seems like some of those areas where there's potentially a lot of pedestrian demand, it makes sense to say that, and especially if you can say it's attracting kids. It's not a school, but it's probably just as much of a pedestrian attractor. I also kind of want to, my plug is for 6th Street, because I think when we did the bike head task force, it was pretty clear there's not a safe way to bike east-west in town, and you know, the flattest way to do that is 6th Street, but you're on a sidewalk for most of it, which is not really safe for everybody. So that section between Monterey all the way to Wisconsin was kind of seen as a high priority bike investment. It's just really expensive. So this would be a great way to fund, you know, 80% of that potentially.
Yeah, I think we'd like to go for those expensive ones that we're going to have trouble funding with the $600,000 in a year split between 3 different things. I think we'd like to try to hit some of the more expensive ones with this type of thing, like 6th Street.
It's not as
Because it's
really practical.
well, and it's very high ranked on our policy, using our policy too. It's the top ranked project. So I think that could be hopefully competitive. We'll look at them though. We're going to look at them against the scoring criteria and make sure that the things we're recommending are things that will score well. Yeah. So, but that may be one.
All righty.
All right.
Thanks a lot.
Well done.